I thought my retirement party would be the happiest night of my life. 40 years of hard work, my family, my wife, everyone I loved was there. But when she stood up, holding those papers with that cold little smile, my entire world collapsed in front of 100 people. And the worst part? My kids already knew. This is the story of how the woman I trusted the most destroyed me in one night, and how I made every single one of them regret it. I still remember that night. Every laugh, every light, every face that smiled at me. They all looked so proud. My wife, my kids, my old coworkers. It was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. My retirement party after 35 years of loyal service. 35 years. That's longer than some marriages last. But mine ended that night. The restaurant was warm, glowing with orange lights and the sound of music I used to love. There was a banner across the wall that said, "Congratulations, Robert," and a table filled with gifts. My wife, Linda, looked beautiful. She wore a red dress, the same color she wore when I first met her at a summer fair in '89. For a moment, I felt that old spark again. I remember thinking, I did it. I built a good life. I made her proud. The room buzzed with laughter. Old friends slapped my back. My boss gave a short speech about my dedication and sacrifice. Our two kids, Emily and Jason, were there too, smiling from the corner, whispering to each other. They looked nervous, maybe. I thought they were just emotional. I didn't know those smiles were hiding guilt. After dinner, Linda stood up. She tapped her glass with a spoon. Ding, ding, ding. And the room went quiet. She smiled that rehearsed perfect smile and said, "Before we end the night, I have something special for my husband." Everyone cheered. Phones were out, recording. I thought maybe she'd written me a letter, or maybe bought that old watch I'd been talking about. My heart actually swelled with love. For once, I felt like maybe she saw me. Not the tired man I'd become, but the man who once made her laugh. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. White, heavy, formal, the kind of envelope you don't give at a party. I took it, still smiling, still playing the fool. Inside, there were no tickets, no letter, just documents, thick, crisp, official. At the top, petition for dissolution of marriage. The words blurred as I stared. Someone gasped. Someone else laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. Linda's voice cut through the silence. "Robert, I think it's time we both move on. You deserve to know. Tonight felt right to do this." The entire room froze. Even the music seemed to stop. I looked at my wife, the woman I had loved for 30 years, and she looked relieved, like a prisoner finally out of a cage. I turned to my daughter. "Emily?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. My son Jason mumbled, "Dad, please don't make this harder than it already is." And that was the moment I realized. They knew, my own kids. They had known this was coming. They helped her plan it. I stood there with the divorce papers in my hands while every person in that room watched me crumble in silence. Some out of pity, some out of shock. And her. She just stood tall, chin up, pretending she was brave. The rage hit me in waves, but deeper than that was shame. Not because my wife betrayed me, but because my children stood by and let her. I wanted to speak, to shout, to throw the papers in her face. But 35 years of discipline held me still. I had always been calm, controlled, measured, and that night, I decided that even if I was falling apart, I would fall with dignity. I folded the papers back into the envelope, placed them on the table, and said the only words I could manage, "Thank you for the surprise, Linda. You've outdone yourself." Then I walked out. No yelling, no crying, just silence. The kind of silence that scares people because they don't know what comes next. Outside, the night air hit me like a wave of ice. I could still hear the muffled music through the windows. The laughter had stopped. No one followed me out. I sat in my car for a long time, watching the condensation form on the windshield. My hands were shaking, not from sadness, from disbelief. Everything I had built, every year, every sacrifice, had been staged to end like this, in a room full of people clapping for my humiliation. I thought of all the late nights I'd spent at work to pay for their vacations, the college tuition, the mortgage, the endless compromises I'd made to keep that family afloat. And for what? A public execution of my dignity. I drove home that night, alone. No one called, not even my children. When I opened the door, the house felt cold, emptier than it had ever been. Half the photos on the walls were missing. Her clothes were gone. Even the wedding photo on the mantel was gone. She had planned this for weeks, maybe months, and the kids had helped her move everything out while I was at work. Every drawer I opened felt like another betrayal. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat in the dark, replaying every moment of that dinner, every smile, every laugh, trying to pinpoint when she stopped loving me. Was it 5 years ago? 10? Or had she never really loved me at all? By morning, the anger had settled into something colder. Focus. Because while she thought that night ended my story, she had no idea it was only the beginning. Morning light crept through the blinds, thin and colorless, like it didn't want to be there either. I hadn't slept. I sat in the same chair all night, staring at the empty space on the wall where our wedding photo used to hang. The clock ticked too loudly. Even the refrigerator hummed like it was mocking me. For the first time in decades, I realized there was no one left to say good morning to. At 7 a.m., the phone buzzed with messages, mostly from coworkers who had been at the party. "Are you okay, man?" I can't believe she did that. And one from my old boss. "If you need a few weeks before signing retirement papers, take your time." I didn't answer any of them. I wasn't ready to talk. Words felt useless. They couldn't hold the weight sitting in my chest. I made coffee out of habit, poured 2 cups, then caught myself. Her mug was still on the rack, white ceramic, a faint lipstick mark on the rim. I threw it into the trash. It shattered, and for a second, that sound felt better than silence. That day passed like fog. I tried reading, watching TV, anything to stop my mind from replaying that moment at the party. But my brain wouldn't cooperate. It kept cutting back to Linda's voice, that calm tone she used when she wanted to seem reasonable. "You deserve to know. Tonight felt right to do this." Those words echoed like a curse. By evening, I went for a walk around the neighborhood. People waved politely, pretending they didn't know. But gossip travels fast in small towns. I could almost hear the whispers behind curtains. "Did you hear what his wife did? Served him papers at his own party." I kept walking, pretending I didn't care, but inside, I burned. When I got home, the mailbox was full. Bills, flyers, and one envelope with no return address. Inside was a short note, typed, no signature. It said, "Check your wife's phone records. You deserve the truth." No explanation. No name, just that. I stared at it for a long time. Was it a prank? A cruel joke? Or was it someone trying to help? That night I opened my laptop and logged into our family phone account. We'd always shared one plan. It used to be my way of keeping things organized. Now it became a window into hell. Dozens of calls to a single number I didn't recognize. Late at night, during work hours. Even on weekends when she said she was visiting her sister. The name listed next to that number in the account contact list hit me like a hammer. Mark H. Mark Harrison. My old manager, the man who'd hired me 35 years ago. The same man who had retired last year, months before me. And suddenly, the puzzle pieces began to fit. I remembered the retirement dinner the company threw for him. Linda had insisted we attend. She'd dressed up more than usual. I thought she just wanted to be supportive, but now I could see it clearly. How they laughed a little too long at each other's jokes. How she stayed behind to help clean up. How Mark had shaken my hand and said, "You've got a wonderful wife, Bob." God, how blind I'd been. My hands trembled as I scrolled further. There were text messages too, hundreds of them, all deleted from her phone, but still listed in the records. Long conversations, picture attachments. The timestamps match perfectly with the nights she claimed to be out with the girls. I sat back in my chair and laughed, one of those broken laughs that turns into something darker. 35 years of loyalty, traded for secret late-night calls with my boss. The humiliation at my own retirement suddenly made sense. It hadn't been spontaneous, it was planned. Mark had been there that night too, sitting in the corner with his new wife, pretending not to notice me. Of course he knew. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Linda wanted me out of the picture cleanly. No scandal, no confrontation, just a public divorce, so she could play the victim while walking straight into his arms. But life has a strange sense of timing, because while she believed she was free, she'd overlooked something important. I wasn't completely powerless anymore. I had nothing left to lose, and that's the most dangerous kind of man. The next morning, I went to the office one last time to clear out my desk. People avoided eye contact. They didn't know what to say. When I walked past Mark's old office, I stopped. His nameplate was still there, taped on the door as if mocking me. I opened the empty room and stood inside, breathing the stale air of secrets. On the wall was a photo of our old project team. Linda had been to that team dinner once. She'd sat right next to him. I took the photo down, folded it, and slipped it into my briefcase. Not out of nostalgia, out of evidence. When I got home, I started collecting everything. Bank statements, credit card bills, old receipts. I wasn't sure what I was looking for yet, but I knew there had to be more. If she wanted a divorce, she'd get it, just not the way she expected. Around midnight, I found it, a line item on our joint account. Monthly transfers of $2,000 to a consulting account. I'd never noticed them before. They'd started 2 years ago, the same time her calls with Mark began. I opened the laptop again, typed the account number into Google, and froze. The business name registered to it, Harrison Property Consulting. So, it wasn't just an affair, it was money. She'd been funneling our savings into his shell company. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. Not only had she mocked me in front of the people I worked beside for decades, she had stolen the reward of my entire career. But something else stirred beneath the rage. Clarity. For the first time since that night, I could see a path. I closed the laptop, exhaled slowly, and whispered to myself, "You wanted to play games, Linda? Fine. Let's play." Revenge doesn't start with fire. It starts with focus. And for the first time in months, I had that again. The next morning, I brewed coffee, just 1 cup this time, and sat down with a yellow legal pad. On top, I wrote, Operation Clean Slate. I wasn't sure why I called it that, but it felt right, because that's what I was doing, wiping the slate clean of 35 years of lies. I spent the next few days going through every drawer, every email, every dusty box in the attic. Linda had always been meticulous, the kind of woman who color-coded everything. But even meticulous people slip up when they think they're invincible. And, oh, she thought she was invincible. She hadn't even changed the password to our shared online storage. There, in a folder labeled House Documents, I found copies of recent transactions, home equity withdrawals, new insurance policies, even a quitclaim deed draft. She was transferring ownership of our second property, the lake cabin, into her name alone. And right below her digital signature, there was another one, Mark Harrison. I leaned back in my chair, whispering, "You stupid fools." They were arrogant enough to use the same notary, the same email trail, the same damn document chain I'd built over the years. That arrogance would destroy them. But I needed proof that would hold up in court. Rage might fuel you, but precision wins wars. So I called my old friend Eddie, a private investigator I'd worked with during a fraud case decades ago. He owed me a favor, and I knew he wouldn't ask questions. "Eddie, I need you to track 2 people, Linda Walker and Mark Harrison, discreetly. No one can know you're involved." He hesitated for a beat. "You're not going to do anything stupid, right, Bob?" I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "No, Eddie, not stupid, just overdue." Within 48 hours, Eddie had everything. Photographs, GPS logs, hotel receipts. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. 3 separate weekends at the same hotel, registered under different names, but paid with the same credit card, Linda's. He even sent me a photo, Mark and Linda, walking hand in hand into the lobby, her wedding ring gone. That photo burned into my brain, but it didn't break me this time. It hardened me. I printed everything out, put it neatly into a black folder labeled Evidence LWNMH. Then I locked it in my desk. Step 1, complete. Step 2 was harder. I needed to turn the law, her weapon, against her. When Linda had served me those divorce papers, she'd assumed I'd crumble, hire no lawyer, and sign away half my life. She'd planned everything: emotional ambush, public humiliation, and then quiet victory. But I wasn't that man anymore. I hired one of the sharpest divorce attorneys in the state, a woman named Rachel Green. She had a reputation for tearing liars apart in court. When I showed her the folder, she didn't blink. She just said, "We'll bury them." For weeks, we worked in silence. Rachel helped me restructure my finances, secure assets, and document everything Linda had touched. Every penny that went missing, every property she moved, every signature she forged, it all became ammunition. Meanwhile, I played my part, the broken husband. I answered Linda's calls when she needed to discuss paperwork. I met her at cafes, acted confused, defeated, harmless. She thought I'd accepted my fate. She even started talking about moving on and finding peace. Peace. That word made my skin crawl. At one meeting, she smiled across the table and said, "Bob, we both deserve happiness. This doesn't have to be ugly." I looked at her, the woman I'd once sworn to love until death, and replied softly, "You're right, Linda. It won't be ugly. It'll just be fair." She smiled, not realizing that fairness was the last thing she'd get. A week later, Eddie called. "Bob, you might want to see this." He sent over a recording, Mark and Linda arguing in a restaurant. The audio was grainy, but her voice was unmistakable. "You said he wouldn't fight it. You promised." "Relax, Linda. He's too old to make trouble." "Old doesn't mean stupid, Mark." Then silence. The kind of silence that happens when two people realize they're both in too deep. I couldn't help but laugh. Not a bitter laugh this time, an honest one. They were cracking under pressure, and they didn't even know I'd barely started. Rachel filed the court motion quietly. Fraud, concealment of assets, infidelity. Every accusation backed by evidence so tight it could choke. Then, by sheer coincidence, or maybe karma, something happened that turned the tide completely. Eddie discovered that Mark had been under investigation by the IRS for misreporting consulting income. And guess what? The Harrison Property Consulting account Linda had been wiring money into, it was part of that investigation. That meant her name, her signature, and her money were all tied to federal fraud. She wasn't just a cheating wife anymore, she was an accessory. I remember sitting on my porch that night, listening to the crickets, sipping whiskey, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Calm, not joy, not even satisfaction, just calm. Because I knew the storm was coming, and this time, I'd be the one watching her freeze. Before the court date, Linda called again. Her voice was light, rehearsed. "I hope we can do this peacefully, Bob. No need to drag it out." I said, "Don't worry, honey. I won't drag anything. I'll let the truth do that for me." I hung up, took one last look around the home we'd built together, and whispered, "You wanted freedom, Linda. I'll give it to you. But you'll wish you'd never asked." The next morning, I put on my best suit, the same one from my retirement party, the same suit I was wearing when she laughed at me in front of everyone. This time, I'd be the one smiling. The courthouse smelled like polished wood and cold air, that sterile kind of place where people come to lose everything or get it back. I walked in with my attorney, Rachel, steady and silent. She moved like she'd already won. Meanwhile, Linda stood near the benches with her lawyer, some slick guy in an expensive suit, all smiles and arrogance. And there she was, my wife, my betrayer. She wore a gray dress, minimal jewelry, the picture of innocence. When her eyes met mine, she gave a small, sympathetic smile, as if this was just another bump in life's road. I didn't smile back. The judge entered and the courtroom rose. I could feel my pulse slow down. I'd been waiting for this moment since the night of my retirement party, the night she turned my life into a punchline. Now it was my turn to speak. The case began routinely, her lawyer painting the narrative of a loveless marriage, of a woman seeking independence after years of emotional neglect. Every sentence twisted reality just enough to make her seem noble, brave even. I sat there, stone-faced, watching her lie, watching her build a house of cards with trembling hands. When it was our turn, Rachel stood. Her voice was calm, razor sharp. "Your Honor, the defense claims this divorce is simple, but what we're about to present will prove it's anything but." She clicked the remote, and the first slide appeared on the courtroom screen. A screenshot of bank transactions. Money wired from our joint account into Harrison Property Consulting. Then another slide, email attachments with Linda's signature authorizing the transfers. The room shifted. You could feel the air tighten. Even the judge leaned forward. Linda's lawyer objected, muttering something about irrelevant financial matters. But the judge waved him off. Rachel kept going, methodical, relentless. She showed the phone records next. Hundreds of late-night calls between Linda and Mark Harrison, some lasting hours, some overlapping with nights Linda claimed to be at her sister's. Then came the photographs, Eddie's surveillance shots, Linda and Mark entering hotels, leaving together in the morning, her hand on his arm, his hand on her back. Each click of the projector was like a hammer strike. I didn't look at her, not yet, but I could hear her breathing shift, short, sharp, trapped between panic and denial. Her lawyer stood abruptly, voice rising. "Your Honor, this is an invasion of privacy," Rachel replied coolly. "Not when it involves joint marital assets, fraudulent financial behavior, and clear infidelity that impacts the division of property." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Then came the final blow. Rachel handed over a document to the clerk. "This," she said, "is an affidavit from a private investigator, along with evidence linking Mrs. Walker and Mr. Harrison to an ongoing IRS fraud investigation. The funds transferred from the defendant's joint account are under review by federal authorities." A murmur ran through the courtroom, like thunder rolling over hills. The judge looked up, expression hardened. "Mrs. Walker, are you aware of this investigation?" Linda's lips parted, but no sound came out. For the first time since that night, she wasn't the one in control. She froze, hands trembling, face draining of color. Her lawyer whispered frantically, but she just stared forward, eyes wide. I finally looked at her. Years of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak condensed into one quiet, steady stare. She saw me, really saw me, and realized this wasn't revenge anymore. It was reckoning. The judge turned to Rachel. "Given these findings, the court will issue an order to hold the division of assets pending the IRS review. Additionally, based on the presented evidence of infidelity and concealment, this court grants full ownership of joint properties and pension benefits to Mr. Walker." Linda gasped audibly. Her lawyer tried to protest, but the judge cut him off with a single raised hand. "Enough. This hearing is adjourned. Mr. Walker, your counsel will be contacted for further proceedings." And just like that, 35 years of marriage ended not with laughter this time, but with silence. Cold, heavy, absolute. When the gavel struck, it echoed through me like thunder. It wasn't joy I felt, not exactly. It was closure, the sound of justice landing where it belonged. As people filed out, Linda stayed seated. Her hands clutched the table like she might fall without it. I walked past her slowly, stopping just long enough to whisper, "You laughed once, remember? At my party. You laughed because you thought I was powerless." I leaned in, voice low and steady. "How does it feel to be the one left with nothing?" She didn't answer, couldn't. Her eyes glistened, and for a moment I saw the woman I once loved, buried beneath the wreckage of her own lies. But pity is something she'd forfeited long ago. Rachel and I stepped outside. The sun was bright, the kind of brightness that almost hurts after you've lived too long in shadow. She turned to me and said, "You handled that better than most people would have." I nodded. No need to yell when the truth already screams loud enough. As I walked to my car, I saw Mark waiting near the steps, gray hair slicked back, sunglasses failing to hide his panic. He didn't say a word, didn't need to. The look on his face said everything. He knew the IRS would come knocking soon. I paused, met his eyes, and said quietly, "You should have picked a better partner, professionally and otherwise." Then I walked away. That evening, I sat at home, with a drink in hand, the sunset glowing over the backyard. The air felt different, clean, like the weight had finally lifted. I thought about everything I'd lost and everything I'd reclaimed. People say revenge doesn't fix anything. Maybe they're right. It doesn't bring back the years, the trust, the love. But sometimes it's not about fixing, it's about finishing. And as the light faded, I realized something. Sometimes justice isn't served in the courtroom. It's served in the quiet, in the stillness of knowing you didn't just survive betrayal. You turned it into her undoing. You'd think victory would feel louder, but it didn't. After the verdict, after the judge's gavel, after the stares and whispers, there was only silence. A silence so deep it almost felt sacred, the kind that tells you it's over, really over. I drove home that afternoon with the windows down, letting the wind rush through the car. For months, every drive had been heavy, weighed down by betrayal. But this time, the air felt lighter. Even the road seemed new, like it wasn't leading me away from something anymore, but towards something else. Still, the peace didn't come overnight. You can't just wash off 35 years of habit, love, and deception like dirt under a faucet. Every corner of the house was haunted by her presence, her perfume still faint on the couch cushions, her handwriting on sticky notes that said things like, "Don't forget milk," or "Love you." Ghosts made of ink and scent. I boxed up what was left of her, not with anger, but with precision. Photo albums, clothes, her favorite books. I stacked them neatly in the garage, not to burn, but to let time decide what to do with them. Because sometimes destruction isn't justice. Sometimes indifference is. A few days later, Rachel called. Her voice carried that tone. The one lawyers use when they're about to deliver news that's technically good, but never feels that way. "Bob, I thought you'd want to know. The IRS moved forward with their investigation. Mark Harrison's consulting firm is officially under review. They traced multiple personal transactions, including those from Linda's transfers." I stayed quiet, letting her words settle. "What happens to her?" I asked. "They'll question her. Maybe more, depending on what they find. But you're clear. The paper trail shows you didn't know." "Good," I said, though my voice didn't sound like mine. 2 weeks later, the local paper ran the headline, "Former corporate executive and partner under federal investigation for fraud." Right below it, Mark Harrison's mugshot. And next to his name, Linda's. Her face looked pale, stunned. The face of someone realizing too late that the man she'd betrayed her life for couldn't even protect himself. Neighbors whispered, "Of course. Small towns feed on stories like this. They chew on scandal like candy." But I didn't mind. Let them talk. They weren't talking about me anymore. They were talking about them. I didn't go to the arraignment, didn't need to see it. Eddie, my old PI friend, texted me a few photos anyway, the two of them being escorted into court in handcuffs. Mark looked deflated, like someone had drained the arrogance right out of him. Linda, though, she looked lost. No smile, no defiance, just a quiet realization that she'd built her future on sand, and the tide had finally come. A part of me, a small, fragile part, felt pity. You don't spend 3 decades loving someone and just erase that entirely. But pity's a dangerous thing. It tries to make you forget what people did, and I'd promised myself I wouldn't forget. After the scandal broke, I started hearing from people I hadn't talked to in years. Old coworkers, friends, even my kids. Yes, the kids. They'd known. I'd found out in court that they'd suspected the affair long before I did, but they hadn't wanted to hurt me. That stung in its own way. But when they showed up at my door, no cameras, no pretense, just them, it hit me differently. My daughter Emily hugged me first. "Dad," she whispered, "I'm so sorry. We should have told you." I held her close, felt her shoulders shake, and said, "You protected me in your own way. I get it." Then came my son, Michael. He'd always been the quiet one, the one who looked like me but carried her charm. He couldn't meet my eyes at first. "I didn't know how to face you," he said, "after everything." I put a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to apologize for someone else's sins." We sat together that evening, just the 3 of us. We didn't talk about Linda much. We didn't need to. Sometimes silence says everything. Over the next few months, life began to rearrange itself. Slowly. I learned to cook for one. learn to sleep without waiting for footsteps in the hallway, learn that quiet could be comforting instead of cruel. Every morning, I walked past the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. A little older, sure, but lighter. There were lines around my eyes that hadn't been there before, but they weren't from grief anymore. They were from clarity. One afternoon, I got a letter in the mail. No return address again. For a second, it reminded me of the first one, the note that started everything. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It read, "Justice looks good on you. E. Eddie." That bastard had a sense of humor. I laughed. A real one this time. The kind that comes from somewhere deep, from a place finally free of rot. Then I poured myself a drink and walked outside. The sun was setting over the yard, gold bleeding into purple, soft wind carrying the smell of pine and rain. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't angry. Not at Linda, not at Mark, not even at myself. Because sometimes revenge isn't about punishment. It's about balance, setting the scales right, even if they tip slowly. That night, I sat on the porch with my old dog at my feet, watching the stars crawl across the sky. I thought about everything I'd been through, every choice, every betrayal, every victory. And I realized something simple. I wasn't the man I used to be. And maybe that was the point. People spend their whole lives trying to avoid pain, but pain can be a sculptor. It carves away the illusions, the weakness, the blind trust, until what's left is raw and real. I'd been broken, but in those cracks, I'd found truth. Linda once said I was too predictable. Maybe she was right, but she never understood that predictable doesn't mean powerless. It means steady. And steady men don't explode. They endure. And when the time comes, they strike cleanly. I finished my drink, leaned back, and smiled to myself. For years, I'd worked to build a legacy for my family. A home, a future, a name. She tried to destroy it. But now, ironically, she'd given it back to me. In her downfall, I found my freedom. Tomorrow, I'll probably mow the lawn, fix the mailbox, maybe call my kids for dinner. Ordinary things. But after a storm like mine, ordinary feels like a miracle. They say time heals all wounds. I don't believe that anymore. Time doesn't heal. It teaches. It doesn't stitch the skin back together. It simply shows you how to stop touching the scar. It's been over a year since that day in court. A year since the gavel came down, and my life, as I knew it, ended. Or maybe finally began. The town moved on, as towns do. New gossip replaced old scandals. Mark Harrison's name faded from the papers, replaced by other disgraced executives, other broken stories. Linda, too, disappeared from conversation. But every now and then, I'll catch someone's glance linger a second too long at the grocery store. And I know they remember. They just don't know what to say. The truth is, I don't mind being remembered. Not for the humiliation, not for the courtroom drama, but for surviving it, for standing back up when I was supposed to stay down. My mornings are quiet now. I wake early, make 1 cup of coffee, and sit by the window while the sun crawls over the fence. The same window that once looked out on the driveway where Linda and I used to wave goodbye to each other before work. Now it looks out on something simpler. Peace. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about her, not out of longing, but out of curiosity. I wonder where she is now, whether she's working some low-level job, trying to rebuild, whether she ever thinks about what she did, whether she regrets it. Maybe she does, maybe she doesn't. But that's not my concern anymore, because the moment I stopped needing her remorse was the moment I truly became free. I used to believe love was about sacrifice, about giving until there was nothing left. But love without respect is just surrender. And I'd been surrendering for years without realizing it. Every yes dear, every avoided argument, every quiet compromise, they were all small funerals for pieces of myself. It took betrayal to wake me up. When everything crumbled, I thought revenge would save me, and for a while, it did. It gave me purpose when I was drowning. It gave me clarity when I was blinded by pain. But revenge, I learned, is like fire. It warms you just enough to remind you you're still alive. And then, if you're not careful, it burns you down with everything else. So I let it go. After the courtroom, after the headlines, after the dust settled, I stopped looking for more punishment. I stopped checking for updates on their case. Because sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to live in the same story anymore. These days, my life is smaller, quieter, but it's mine. I work part-time at the local library, help with community events, volunteer at the Veterans Home once a week. People there know me as Mr. Walker, the retired guy who's always early and never forgets names. They don't see the scars beneath the calm, and that's fine. Scars don't need to be seen to matter. Every so often, my daughter visits with her kids. They run through the yard, laughing, chasing the dog I swore I wouldn't adopt but did anyway. And when I watch them, their small feet pounding across the grass, their laughter cutting through the air like sunlight, I realize something simple. I didn't lose my family. I just lost the one person who didn't value it. And that's not tragedy. That's cleansing. Sometimes at night, I sit on the porch and think about that first night. The retirement party, the betrayal, the look on her face when she handed me those papers. It used to haunt me. Now, strangely, I'm grateful for it, because that moment forced me to meet a version of myself I'd never known before. The version that doesn't beg to be loved, but demands to be respected. People often ask, would you do it all again if you knew how it would end? And my answer is always the same. Yes. Because without that pain, I'd still be sleepwalking through life, mistaking comfort for happiness. Pain taught me truth. Betrayal taught me boundaries. And loss taught me freedom. I used to measure my worth by loyalty, by how long I could hold on. Now, I measure it by how gracefully I can let go. I don't hate Linda, not anymore. Hatred keeps you tethered to the thing that broke you. And I'm done being tethered. If I saw her today, I think I'd just nod, wish her peace, and keep walking. Because forgiveness isn't for her. It's for me. It's what keeps me from becoming the thing I fought against. Some nights, I still dream about the life we almost had. The porch swings, the grandkids, the lazy Sundays. But dreams fade when morning comes. And when the light hits the window just right, I see not what I lost, but what I found. Myself. People think strength means never breaking, but I've learned real strength is breaking quietly and rebuilding without applause. No one claps for the man who rebuilds his life alone. But when you wake up one morning and realize you're no longer bitter, that's when you know you've won. This story didn't end in flames. It ended in clarity. And clarity is rarer than happiness. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. The people who betray you are teachers. Brutal ones, yes, but teachers nonetheless. They show you who you were, and more importantly, who you can become when you finally stop letting their choices define yours. So when I tell my story now, I don't tell it as a tragedy. I tell it as a lesson. Because maybe someone out there, someone who just got handed their own divorce papers, someone whose world just collapsed, needs to know this. You can lose everything and still win in the end. You can be broken and still become whole. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't destroying the one who hurt you. It's rebuilding so beautifully that their memory doesn't matter anymore. The night is quiet again. Crickets hum, the wind brushes through the trees, and I take a deep breath. For the first time in decades, I feel light. Not because I got justice, but because I'd let go of everything that wasn't mine to carry. And as I close my eyes, one thought drifts through my mind, soft as a whisper. She wanted freedom. So did I. The difference is, I finally earned mine.